Welcome, everybody. Hello, hello. It is Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Central, and of course, it is live time here at Moving Image. Let's go ahead and give you a little background, I guess, on Tami and I. We met through a networking group called the Inner Circle, and it's a fantastic group of both men and women. And of course, the idea is to grow our networks. And what I love about this group is there's a real focus on collaborating and doing things together, or using each other, of course, as resources, not just referrals. And Tami is the owner of Gray's Own Mentoring, and she is a job career coach. She helps you, find jobs, work on your resume, all sorts of things like that. Of course, interviewing. She and I teamed up a couple of months ago now to provide a training on the body language side of interviewing. And now we have a joint package, even, where we will do a mock interview with you, and I will be looking at body language and she will be looking at your content, which is fantastic. We've kind of Wonder Twin Powers joined forces, which is fantastic. And I love to do these kind of collaborations. If you have an idea of something that you think might be a good fit for and a one-off training that we do, or something that you would like to offer to your clients, definitely reach out and talk to me. Let me see. My first question to her was all about, uh, body language, or if there's any mistakes that she sees people making in the interview space. Go.
So what do I see in with body language? I think when people aren't comfortable in their own skin, sometimes they can come across as stiff or awkward, and our intuition reads something into it, like something's off and I'm not sure what that is, but my red flags are going up. I'm not totally sure. So just confidence and owning yourself, I think, is half the battle, right?
I was a little late in getting my best from last week, everybody.
I think that's where we have
when
the,
you go
that was
to
the first truth
the
bomb.
YouTube channel and watch that, I got sort of fun and fancy with graphics, with bombs, and and things, and and what the truth bombs were. So I think that's the first one. Confidence and ownership is half the battle. No matter what you're doing, whether you are interviewing, whether you are speaking to your team, whether you're giving a TED Talk. I coach TED Talks too, if you didn't know. Several of my folks that I coached have over 1 million views, which is fantastic. But you need to have confidence. That's the number one thing that people read in that first impression. And let me see what my notes have here. That's a good note that I put. I was trying to figure out what I was meaning there. Is we are closer than ever to a point where people want you to be you. I know authenticity is bantered about a lot these days, but what they're really getting at is they just want you to show up and be you, basically, warts and all, right? And we can certainly improve and continue to improve our presence and continue to improve the way that we speak about ourselves and take out the ums, ahs, like, so's, knows. We can certainly continue to improve, but we want to get to know you, particularly for an interviewing kind of situation where we're trying to figure out whether there's a right fit between you and the company. If you come in as somebody not yourself and then you take the job, you may be sorely disappointed.
One of the things I talk about, I had mentioned offline that I have this talk called Communicating with Intent, Your Words, Your Outcomes. I talk about the difference between passive and assertive language. And when I talk about that, I also talk about body language. And so you'll probably appreciate some of this, but I think when I'm speaking, I can do this on a stage. We'll see how much of it fits into Zoom. I try and act it out. But when women walk into a meeting, a lot of times their shoulders are hunched, they're curled in, and their arms are like this. And in between their chest and their arms is their laptop or their binder. And it's almost like a shield protecting them. And this body language sends to the group like, I don't feel confident. I don't want to be here. I'm not engaged. It can send like, who knows, right? It sends all of that or something. But on the other end, we're going, oh, that means this. And I just jump to that conclusion because I make that up because I already know the person. And so I see that person as weak because of this. And it could be that she's just cold, right? Who knows? So even just little things like walking into a conference room, walking into an interview, having your shoulders back, making eye contact, looking up, your arms at your side is a huge thing to do.
I have a blog on my website that is all about interviewing and the idea that, yes, you shouldn't go in clutching things, or women particularly. We have a lot of stuff that we come up with. And we have our coat, and then we've got our briefcase, and we've got our resume. And so we're shaking hands kind of like this, and that doesn't bode well because we're giving the impression that we have less confidence because we're blocking ourselves. Even if it is absolutely not true, that is how it reads, because we're protecting ourselves with something physical. And therefore, kind of the lesson here is when the receptionist walks up and says, "May I take your coat?" or "Would you like to leave your bag?" or something. Okay? If you're coming from something else, you might have a briefcase bag with a laptop in it or something that you're not going to use during the interview. Take out the notebook or the folder with your resume in it, and then leave everything else behind so that you can be free to do things like shake hands.
Laughing as you're saying all this because are we actually going to get to a place where a receptionist asking to take our coat again? Like I can't even
Oh,
fathom in an
right.
in
You're right.
person.
And that was funny. We had a good laugh over that. And
In terms of interviewing, people definitely wanted to do some targeted coaching around how do I do this? How do I show up and convey my energy and my enthusiasm and make eye contact? And I know you've mentioned this of even just the glasses are like one more barrier. And in terms of making eye contact, which is so critical for us. And it's a transition, but the good thing is we're all going through it together. And the person interviewing you is also having to learn how to do this. And
what she's talking about, I forgot to prime this with the question. I had asked her if she thought it took a while for people to adjust to all things virtual. So we're talking about virtual communication.
uncomfortable and not in the ideal scenario. So that's the only comfort I take is that we're all having this collective experience together. And it is a transition. And I hope that people are a little bit more lenient about it. And we've all learned all kinds of tools. Like I've got my little ring light attached here so I don't look like I'm in shadows and all those things that we've talked about on the webinar. But yeah, for me, my coaching business has always been virtual. So when March 16th, that was the official day that we were home and this was our new reality. It wasn't a whole lot different for me because I was already doing that. But I know it's been a massive transition for the majority of the population.
So the next part of our conversation is interesting because we moved on into do's and don'ts of attire, because what you're wearing creates so much of that first impression. And as we'll talk about in a minute, what you're wearing can also impact your body language and how you're showing up.
So the first thing that I really want to mention is do not wear maybe any cologne or perfume if you're going in person. If you do, make sure it's like 1 spritz and not like 30. Because I'll never forget this one guy when I was interviewing in person as a recruiter who had such intensely strong cologne that it lingered in the hallway down to reception all afternoon. And everybody was walking going, what happened here? I mean, it was really strong. And what happens is then that becomes its own presence in the interview. There's there's me and him and the cologne, and super distracting. But fortunately, I'm okay. I know now a lot of people have sensitivities and allergies. So if that had been somebody else, they could have started coughing or wheezing or whatever. I don't know how you would work with that individual because it was overwhelming, and on a day-to-day basis could be really hard. In HR, we've also had to coach on people that showed up with body odor that they didn't address, which is also not fun. That's different. So what do I see in
So that was, of course, a very, kind of fun part of the conversation, but it really does make sense, right? Avoid the cologne, make sure you're wearing deodorant because you don't want to be the person that is uh, working virtually on purpose, like, no, you don't need to come back to the office. Or if you do love your cologne, then go after those work from home jobs where that's where you don't get to go into the office and you do work from home. And then you can spritz as much cologne as you like.
then that also goes into, I guess this is more for women than men,
There we go.
big overpowering jewelry, big hoops, big chunky, big everywhere that becomes distracting. So simple, streamlined is also good, kind of tailored that way is helpful.
So what I would like to add to this is how your jewelry or what it is that you're wearing can affect your body language. If you're wearing really large, chunky earrings or something, and you are conscious of them touching your face or something when you move your head around, you may not move your head very much because it starts to annoy you that you can feel them touching your face. If you are on a virtual interview and you have the big chunky jewelry on, it might be rubbing against your microphone. If you're using earbuds as your microphone, you might hear that scraping, so you certainly don't want that. Same thing with bangles that make noise. You might stop gesturing because you realize, oh, I wore these bangles and now they're making noise and they're jingle jangling together, and that's no good. Depending on what you're wearing, be aware of things that are lower cut where you may realize, oh wow, I can't really lean over in this. Or if you're for women particularly with the short skirts, it looks great when you're standing up, but the minute you sit down, you're very conscious of, and you have to keep your legs, and you kind of keep pulling down on your skirt, or you have to keep your legs in a certain position in order to keep that skirt from uh, going up too far. It's, you just don't want to have any of those distractions. You don't want to have any of that worrying you during an interview, and it's going to restrict your natural movement, which again might change you looking like you. And that's what we've been talking about, that we don't want to do that. One of the things that I asked Tami was kind of about dress code, because we get a lot of those questions that I do for presentations or speakers. How do I know what the dress code is?
And it's hard to give advice on dress code because I feel like our culture is changing so quickly that I think if you show up in a suit, you might actually not get the interview because of it. Because, and same thing for women. So it really depends on your industry, your location, the culture of the company. And you can ask the recruiter, like, what's the dress code? How do you suggest I show up for the interview? I think that's an appropriate question to ask these days. I mean, for men, it could be a really nice pair of jeans and a blazer is way sharper and more current and hip than a traditional blue pinstripe suit. So that's a really tricky one to come up with. And I know tattoos are becoming much more common, and some of my clients have them in very visible places. And, my philosophy, I just had this with a client yesterday, was, you know, don't hide it. Like, this is you, and you're not going to hide it every day at work. And if the culture doesn't support that, I'd rather know that than to try and pretend it doesn't exist. And then, oh, you get the job and now you find out that that's a challenge. So there's a lot of interesting things on the physical side that I think we can talk about.
The takeaway here, of course, is ask about what the dress code is. And one place that you can ask without really asking is to do your due diligence on the internet and find videos that the company has put out. Or
I think as a rule, women often go to one extreme or another.
oh, I'm going to pause here. This is really a great section here. This is talking, asked her, about women because of Women's History Month, and we just had International Women's Day yesterday. So, what is it about women that we could be sharing with the world, and what they need to be doing, perhaps more, different, the same?
They're too aggressive, they're too passive, they're not assertive enough. So, on the passive side, it's what we talked about with the shoulders in, the not making eye contact, the conveying that they're not in their own power and that they're lacking confidence or knowledge or something. But then we see women that go to the other extreme, that they feel like they have to overspeak or over be present to get their command across, and show up like a guy and be as brusque and intense. And in my talk, Be Bold, Not Bossy, I talk about the B words, that women go to the other. So I have a concept. I'll go back a second and explain this, because I think it's kind of interesting, of the boldness barometer is what I came up with. So on one end, we've got that passive, meek, quiet, disengaged, disinterested. So when you're quiet, I don't know if you are clueless as to what's going on, and you're just like, I'm just going to sit here and keep my mouth shut because I don't know what's happening. Or if you have a million great ideas, but you're not confident enough to express them. And so I'm going to make up my own ideas about them. And that's what we talked about earlier. On the other end, you've got bold, brash, brazen, the bad B word, and like all that bucket of intensity. And sometimes we think when we come across strong, then we're really getting our message across. And that is a real turnoff, right? And so the way I talk about it in my talks is that the balance is blending assertiveness, humility, and tact. And when we can get that together, that's when we're at our peak in terms of being heard.
Okay, everybody, that was another one of the big truth bombs from our conversation. Blend assertiveness, humility, and tact to be heard. That's going to take some skill. That's going to take some thought. Are you being assertive but yet humble? Do you have tact when you're saying what it is that you're saying, so that you don't just come off as brash? And all of those things will help you be heard. So now the next is the body language part. So let's listen.
And so there's you would be better at this than me, of talking about how the body language then ripples out to those two things. I mean, when you're too high on the boldness barometer, you're in people's faces, right? Like you're using passive aggressive qualifiers. Like, frankly, I got to tell you, or honestly, and anytime you're starting off that way, what the other person does is, oh yeah, what do you have to say? And so they're not listening anymore. They're preparing their defense, right? And so we think that when we come across as strong, then people will really hear us. And more often than not, they tune us out. And so finding that leading with empathy and coming into situations with curiosity and a little bit quieter, I think, can have a stronger presence in the long term.
So let's unpack that just a little bit. How do we come in softer, or with more equity, or how do we do that? Well, it doesn't mean that you have to be meek or that you need to do all of the things that we were telling women not to do, which is shrink and all of those things. The softness comes in from using your upper body. I know I talk about this almost every week, but I'm telling you, give yourself access to this upper body, and you will see people open up to you in ways that you have never seen before. Because this is our signal of compassion. This is our signal of caring. And what happens is women take on that maleness because they don't have as much access to this part of the body because they've been taught that men don't cry and they don't show emotion and all of those sorts of things. So that kind of shuts us um, down if we're trying to be sort of manly, or we think to be executive, we have to turn this off. And that is so not true. So to come in softer, it's just having access to this. You're still using the same words, but instead of saying, maybe we could look at this another way, I don't believe that that is the best course of action for us to be taking right now. That is softer, coming in with without being over harsh or something, versus I don't think that's what we should be doing right now. I don't think that's the right course of action. You see how much harder, and I stiffened up and I tensed up and it made my voice go fast and get rougher, which is not what we want. We don't want to come off, that comes across as reactionary. And as soon as you come across that way, everybody else, as Tami was saying, shuts off to you. They tune you out, particularly women. They're going to tune us out. And so you need to be stealthier about it. Go in with the same comment, but with different body language, and they're not going to realize what hit them. Got it? You got to practice that a little bit. All right. So, how do we find Tami in real life? She is with Gray Zone
Yeah, as you mentioned,
Mentoring.
I'm a career coach with a job search specialty. That's tough to get out. My website is www.grayzonementoring.com, and I spell gray zone with an E, not an A. And I offer a lot of coaching around that. As I've alluded to, I have a couple of talks I give. So if your organization might be needing a webinar, because I don't know if we're doing any lunch and learns or keynotes these days, those are available on webinars on communication skills. I love to talk. And I know you know this, Allison, I'll share it with a group, but I'm also a fiction writer. And I've got this other identity where I lead writing programs and retreats and activities there. So you can reach me through my website for anything, and I can direct you from there to the right resource. But Tamara Palmer Author is my my website for my writing. Then that also goes.
Okay. So please connect with Tami if you are thinking about the job search. And one of the things that Tami didn't highlight, which she really should have, is that she is great at helping you decide whether you want to enter into the job search at all. uh, if you're considering it, but you're not sure, it really helps to talk with someone who is skilled and who understands what the job market is right now and how long it's taking people to get jobs and things like that. And Tami's really good at helping you discern whether it's really switching careers, switching companies, maybe working for yourself if you think you're going to enter this entrepreneurial world. Discernment on what is the best path. And maybe it's staying where you are, but advocating for yourself or taking on a different role within the company that you are already in and with, because that is one of the mistakes that some people make is they jump ship and then they realize the grass isn't actually greener on the other side of the fence. Oh, Anna was with us this morning. I agree. I think there were some great takeaways, even in this kind of format. I think people weren't really asking questions because they knew that they couldn't answer. But at least it is an opportunity, it's a way for people to come on the show that can't come at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, depending on where you're at time zone wise. So thanks for being here this morning, Anna. Appreciate the comment. Next week, we are back to having a live person, but next week I have Amy Gardner with us, and she works with lawyers, which should be super interesting. Have a fantastic week. We will see you next week as well. If you happen to have joined TikTok, guess what? I had a video go super. I don't know whether over 100K views is viral, but I'm over 1,000 followers. So I just started a week ago on TikTok, and I already can go live on TikTok, and it's kind of blowing up. So apparently there's not a lot of body language people on TikTok. I'm not sure. So you can find me there at Moving Image Body Lang. I didn't know what to call myself. I didn't want to necessarily just use my name. I feel a little weird with all those strangers using my name as my handle. But so find me on TikTok. We're on Clubhouse every Thursday at 6 p.m. talking about collaborations and things like Tami and I did. We collaborated. We have this product. So, oh, hey, Lisa, you watch some TikTok. Really, the most entertaining thing on the TikTok, everybody, it's part 3. What I did was I came on during I posted during the commercial breaks of the Oprah, uh, Meghan, Harry interview. And that was strategic. I chose something that I knew the hashtags would blow up for and as my first kind of big thing. So I think there's 9 parts because it was a 2-hour special. But part 3 is the one that is blown up.